The future of customer experience, or pretty much anything really, is always built in the present. And what I mean by that is we don't have relationships tomorrow if we don't build them today. We don't nurture them or don't fix them. We don't tend to them today.
Welcome to the Global Experience. Get ready as we take you into the dynamic world of customer service and collections.
You will gain access to the secrets of success in the world of customer and employee experience through conversations with keynote speakers, industry mavericks, and CX and debt collections experts and influencers.
Let's get into it.
Sawubona, welcome, and hello. On today's episode, we have a renowned customer experience advisor, author, speaker, and workshop leader, Adrian Swinscoe. Adrian runs his own show called Punk CX and is the author of Punk CX, Punk XL, and How to Wow. He is currently a Forbes columnist, always struggle on that word for a funny reason, focusing on customer service and customer experience. We're super excited to have you on the show today, Adrian, all the way from Scotland. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Very well, Bryce. Natalie, great to see you. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Well, it's lovely to have you on the show. So, Adrian, something we like to do just before we kick off is to give our listeners a better feel of where you are in the world, what temperature you're experiencing, what time it is. And yeah, I'll start. So we are in Johannesburg, in our Johannesburg office, South Africa. And right now we are enjoying the summer months of the year. It is currently 27 degrees Celsius and it is about 2 p.m. in the afternoon.
So you're in the summer. We're kind of right on the edge of winter. I'm here in Edinburgh. It is a bright and sunny day, but the temperature is about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, that is swelteringly hot. Wow, I think I would be... No ways, that's cold. That is cold. I think something we're not used to is that kind of coldness, I guess,
Yeah.
as South Africans in general. So in this stage, rather you than us.
Well, what they say, there's no such thing as bad weather, there's only kind of like poor kit.
That's true.
That's a great way of putting it. So make sure to have those layers wrapped up. But maybe, Adrian, to start us off, would love to provide our listeners with a better understanding of like how your journey in the world of customer experience started and progressed, and a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. So a bit of a thumbnail sketch on me. So I trained as an economist and then also as a teacher, and then worked in both professions in the 90s, primarily in the Middle East. I was living I moved to live in Cairo in Egypt in about 1993, and sort of worked as both as an economist and as a teacher there across, and then with a period in London in the middle of the 90s, but basically across most of the 90s I was in the Middle East. And so that was really interesting, formative sort of experience. I toyed with the idea of becoming a professional economist, which sort of means you have to go back to school and take a PhD. And I got very close to that and got offers of places and things, and decided that I didn't really have the stamina to do it, like another 5 years worth of study. So I sort of switched tack and took an MBA. Came back to London, took an MBA, and then worked for a couple of corporates in and around the time of the first sort of .com boom, sort of like 1999, 2000. And I was doing all sorts of different things like new venture development, some bit of strategy work, sort of just internal consultancy, that type of stuff. And that lasted till about 2004. And then at the time I was working for Shell, and then they went through a bit of a restructure on the back of an oil reserves booking scandal. They ended up booking more oil than they thought they had, and then they had to kind of like restructure very quickly to kind of gather a bunch of money to go and put more holes in the ground. That meant that I was in more of a forward-leaning sort of innovation sort of space, so that my kind of area got cut. And I was offered an operational job, and I was like, well, I'm not really sure that's the thing for me. So I ended up deciding I was going to go and sort of try my hand out, sort of working independently. Did a few things, big corporate projects, sort of some corporate venturing. Actually did a project which involved South Africa. And it was, interestingly enough, if it had come off, it would have been a very, very different story for me, because we ended up trying to buy a steel company and relocate it to South Africa. And it was a specialized steel company that was in the railway industry. Anyway, that's another story. So I might have been a steel magnate. Haha, big top hat and a cigar. But did that for a few years, and then actually realized that I liked the idea of working independently. And I realized I could see the way that the market was developing, and that in order to be successful in that space, you needed to develop a bit of a digital footprint. And so around about the time of sort of 2008, 2009, I started thinking about this, and then I started writing on my own blog and things, and I was writing about general business stuff to start with, and I got very boring very quickly. And so I thought, well, I need to write about something that I either don't like or I care about. And the thing that occurred to me is that I don't like bad service. Never have done, and still don't. And that doesn't make me any different to anybody else. But I just took it upon myself, as I have this background as being a researcher, an analyst. It's kind of one of my kind of key sort of skills. So I thought, well, let me kind of start exploring this and seeing what happens, because I'd always developed things in the past that had customer and employee value at their heart. So I thought I started to explore it. So I started writing about it, and then I started a podcast back in January 2011. That was kind of before it was cool. Now it's cool. And I'll probably still be podcasting when it's no longer cool. And along the way, actually, I also wrote another book, which you didn't list. It's called Rare Business, which was like an anthology of stuff that I'd actually kind of written. That was sort of self-published. But it's not really available right now. It's out of print. And so over the years, I've been able to write and explore what I think good service and a good customer experience looks like from an organizational perspective, from a technology perspective, from a people and culture perspective, all the different dimensions. And over the course of that, I've written 4 books, have a Forbes column. As I say, I've still got a running kind of podcast, and it's allowed me to develop relationships with different brands, different service providers, different tech providers, in terms of how to help them drive sort of the better outcomes that we're trying to kind of deliver. Because for me, that's the only thing that I'm really interested in. Only ever interested in outcomes. How can we build an organization that delivers better outcomes for both customers, employees, and also organizations, like business outcomes? And so I'm always in pursuit of that. I'm not trying to sell any particular process or approach or anything else. I'm more interested in the problem itself and how we can properly address the problem and what sort of ways we can address it.
Yeah, I think from I guess Natalie and myself, our engagement over the past 6 months or so with CX experts, influencers, I think this is a very differing kind of story. I mean, you started in economics, very, very much kind of left brain field of study, very particular personality that you wouldn't think would kind of speak on customer experience. But the difference is you were looking for content to create, and you're finding that aspect that's it's right about something that you don't like, and you almost like fell into customer experience in such a way, but you almost made it your own. It wasn't like we have a lot of people who started in contact centers, who started in BPOs or in customer experience campaigns or agents. Very, very different story. And I think that's great because it brings a different perspective to the world.
Yeah, it was like a very personal experience, which actually ended up being quite helpful to others.
Yeah, well, I think the thing I I wrote it on. I write it as sort of a description of what I cover on my Forbes column, and I say that I write about customer service and the customer's experience.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people talk about being customer experience sort of experts and all these different things, and I'm like, I don't consider myself an expert. I'm a student. I'm an investigator. I'm a researcher. I'm an advocate for better outcomes, and I'm an instigator of some for others. And that's the thing that's always been at the heart of it, is that I'm coming at this to advocate for the people that work in the space, but also the people that receive that service or that experience.
And obviously this kind of took you on a journey to then start authoring those 4 books that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, they were published in 2016, 2019, and 2021. I think the 3 most recent ones. Which one of those do you think would be most relevant today, in today's age, in 2023? Do you think it would be the latest book that you wrote? And why?
So I think they all have their own sort of their own things. They all sort of almost like build on each other. I mean, I think even How to Wow is still relevant. I mean, surprisingly relevant, because actually what I realized and didn't realize necessarily at the time is that a lot of the things that we were talking about and the cases that we were using and the examples, a lot of it's almost like fundamental principles around building relationships with people, doing the right thing, how do you kind of manage sort of stuff, how do you respond to things. And because it's not technologically heavy, the book, none of the books are technologically heavy. I advocate for the use of technology, the appropriate use of technology. And if that means the appropriate use of the most advanced technology, then so be it. But actually it's focusing on the very human side of things, about what do the humans get. And so I think Punk XL is probably the most relevant now, because Punk XL is built on this idea that it was no longer sufficient to talk about just customer experience in isolation, and we have to take a more holistic view of things. And it was trying to advocate for us to take a more holistic view of experience, and it sort of, his aim was to try and start a conversation around that, and that's why it's called XL, and XL stands for Experience Leadership, because it strikes me as being odd when we talk about, brands talk about market leadership or brand leadership or technological leadership, and yet many people are talking about, customer experience is the thing that we differentiate ourselves on, and yet we're not talking about experience leadership. And I was like, well, maybe we should start. Now, what that looks like, who knows? But that's up to us to kind of dig into. And I'm not alone in this. Now, other people like Gartner have talked about it as well. They've talked about TX, which is total experience. And so it's in that sort of similar sort of vein. But I do think that the underlying premise of those Punk books, which was that I had a frustration that there's so much activity and enthusiasm and investment in the area of customer experience. I was frustrated about the lack of significant improvement in those outcomes. And it struck me that we needed, or I would like to have seen somebody to do something a bit more punk to try and move the needle. And what I mean by that is that it's punk was, as a musical genre or a social phenomenon, was just something that wasn't afraid of doing something different.
Rebellious.
Yeah, and making a noise and trying something new. And you don't need permission to do it. So it exploded out the back of progressive rock, and progressive rock was this kind of complex, elaborate musical sort of style, which almost felt like you needed a PhD in music to be able to participate. Where punk was just like going, nah, anybody can set up a band, anybody can have a go. It might not work, and it might not be for everybody, but that's fine. At least you notice it. and then it has an impact, and I thought applying that sort of idea and this drive to try and seek out creative ways to address some of the problems that we face, which encourages people to be braver, to think differently, and to do different things in pursuit of those outcomes. I thought, yeah, no, that's a it's a good thing to encourage people to do, because it also strikes me, one of my favorite bits in the Punk CX book is the first track. So there's not chapters, there's like sections, but it's started like an album, so there's tracks, so it's like short tracks. And the first track in the book, the title of it just basically asks a question which says, are you an artist or are you colouring in? And it's the idea that most people are following a process, right? They're just colouring in, expecting to create art, because experience is not just all science and process and all these things. It's also art, because it's emotional. It requires engagement for you to connect with it. And I think that's the challenge to us, is that if we just follow a process, then we might get like a nice looking picture, but it's not going to be art. It's not going to be artful. It's not going to necessarily engage somebody. It's going, nice picture. And possibly be like, meh. And I think that's the question is, and the challenge is like, where's the art? And I don't mean art in terms of painting and all these different things. Where's the stuff that's going to move people? Where's the heart and where's the emotion that goes into this? We can talk about engaging, understanding how customers feel and how we respond to that. That's fine. But it also applies to us. It's like, how do we feel about the service and the experience that we're delivering? Does it make our chests swell up and we feel proud, put our shoulders back and it's like, yeah, that's us? Or is it a bit like, yeah, it's all right?
Yeah, that's a very unique way to look at it, I must say. And Adrian, I mean, you've almost fallen into the industry of customer experience. But how do you see it evolving? And what would you give it advice to businesses? What would you say they should prepare for going forward?
So I think that there's another thing I would say that I've been saying recently, and I quite like it, and it's something that's occurred to me like a while ago, but it sort of gets stuck with me. And it's this idea that, the future of customer experience, or pretty much anything really, is always built in the present. And what I mean by that is we don't have relationships tomorrow if we don't build them today. We don't nurture them or don't fix them. We don't tend to them today. And I think the difference is that we find ourselves in such an era of rapid technological development that too many people are getting caught up in what the future could possibly hold. Like right now, we're right in the midst of generative AI. That's the massive wave this year. Before that, it was the metaverse. Before that, it was blockchain. Before that, it was chatbots, etc., etc. These things come in waves. But I think the generative AI wave will have a fundamental impact on the whole sort of space. But here's the interesting thing. Too many people are getting caught up in thinking about, the future.
Yeah.
Generative AI, all these different things. But they forget about what's happening sort of now. I mean, research shows that customer service, customer experience standards around the world and different parts of the world are slipping. Customers, while their expectations are rising, they're also reporting that they're like, well, I'm not getting as great service, and we're almost sinking back to levels we've not seen since 2015, 16, 17 sort of thing, so pre-pandemic levels. And similarly, you look at it and go, there was a piece of research that came out of Deloitte earlier this year, the Global Contact Center survey, that said only 7% of the global contact center leaders that they surveyed said that they had all of their channels integrated with each other. So that idea that we've been talking about omni-channel customer experience for like 10 years, maybe 15 years now, and yet only 7% of them have actually made that mark. and yet we're moving on to the next thing. But other research shows that having to repeat myself or having to ask somebody to repeat themselves is the uppermost and the top and also shared concern from both customers and people. Customers hate having to repeat themselves. And agents hate having to ask customers to repeat themselves. It creates all sorts of, friction and load and, and all that sort of stuff. And so you kind of get to that point, you're like going, well, if that's this underlying concern, why aren't we doing something about that? Now, I recognize that it's like sometimes it's technologically complex and there's all sorts of legacy stuff that goes on with the organizations and everything else. But we've been talking about this now for 10 years or so. And where we're at, the progress that we've made is just not acceptable because it's not attending to the problems and the friction that exists both inside organizations, but also with the customers that they serve. And so the people that get it right balance that tension about thinking about and preparing for the future, but also attending to the present. And they give it equal amounts of sort of focus. And the people that are falling behind are not giving the present as much focus as they are giving the future. And the challenge is because the present is not as sexy, is not as cool as kind of all the future stuff, because tending to problems in the present is hard work. It takes time, it takes grit, it takes commitment, it takes determination. But it's the stuff of champions. Think about any athlete or any sporting team that's ever been successful for a sustained period of time. And it's never a flash in the pan. It's like they don't just show up and play great. The work is done on the training pitch or in the gym or in the pool or wherever they can play. Right? And it's been developed over time and over years. You guys have just been successful at the Rugby World Cup. But that wasn't just about a team that was randomly assembled and then asked to play in a tournament. That was built years ago, even before the previous World Cup where you were successful as well. It's like it's years and years and decades in the making.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I think when you put it into sport, my brain immediately lights up. Yeah, because you think about the great teams. It's even if they have a really good season or a really good team, they don't stop purchasing new players for the future, for the next team. So then it can't stop. If you're already giving good customer experiences now, it doesn't mean that you can't stop adding to it in the form of technology while still providing a quality customer experience in the present.
Exactly. So you have to attend to that. You plan for the future, but you play and you compete in the present. And you respond to kind of whatever kind of comes in the present, and that's how you win, and that's how you continue to win.
That's I think a great summary for like something that businesses should prepare for.
It's a great analogy as well, comparing it to sport.
Yeah,
it's all the preparation, but in the present is what it comes down to, which I think is so accurate.
Yeah. You spoke about, I was reading one of your columns on Forbes the other day, and in one of the articles you mentioned that it's not technology that is hampering a business, but it's the transformation inside a business that is a blocker. So, or like the lack of technological implementation, but it's the lack of transformation inside a business that is a blocker, right? What do you mean by that? Can you maybe elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so this came about. I attended a bunch of events and talking to lots of different sort of people, and I was in the technological space. I mean, there's rapid development in the technological sort of space, and it's all very exciting and offers incredible range of possibilities and potential. And so that's all great. It's all kind of like known and understood, I think. Excuse me. But also the implementation thereof of the technology is increasingly well understood. But in talking to people still weren't being able to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And the piece you're referring to, I was talking about going to an event, and I was talking about this underlying hum that was coming out of the event was actually, it's not about the technology, it's not about the implementation thereof. It's the underlying hum is like going, this is an organizational problem. This is a people problem. This is a change and a cultural problem. And what it just made me kind of think about is that, and it's absolutely right, and this chimes with many of the stats and previous research that says when you take on big change transformation projects, the key thing that people tend to get wrong and forget or don't pay enough attention to is the people side of things, like bringing people with them. And we have to recognize that actually we're the blockers. And we have to work harder on ourselves to, one, be honest with ourselves, and two, get over ourselves, and then learn new habits and develop new behaviors and new characteristics. And I think that's one of the things that we do is that, again, it's like sometimes the technology I feel is a bit of a deflector. And actually we need to turn the camera or the mirror back on ourselves and look at what's in the mirror and go, what are we going to do differently? Because technology is not the solution. It's like it can help, it can enable, it can support, but it's not going to work if it doesn't get the support of the people. So that's what I meant by that, is that actually the biggest challenge that we have is actually how do we get people involved? How do we kind of bring them with them? How do we kind of like enable them and support them in order to be the transformation? Not about transforming people, but almost like how do you enable people to be the transformation?
Yeah, no, definitely. Adrian, I must say you are such an insightful person. And I mean, we would actually want to know, as well as I think our listeners would want to know, if they're not following you to get all this information on CX and insightful blogs or Forbes articles, where do you find all this information? It seems like you do a lot of reading.
I do a lot of reading, but I have a bunch of things set up that I subscribe to an inordinate amount of newsletters and updates and all these different things. Most of which I delete almost instantly. Over time, I've built up a network of people that send me stuff, particularly like PR agencies with new reports and updates about different firms and stuff, which is great. One of the things I do, it's a really, really simple thing, is I use Google Alerts.
Okay.
So if you don't know what Google Alerts are, you should look them up. And Google Alerts allows you to put in a search term. So I could put in customer service or customer experience or customer behavior or customer engagement or contact centers or whatever it might be. And I can ask it to send me a summary of stuff that gets posted that gets captured by those keywords on like a daily, weekly, hourly, whatever basis. And so it does it to me every kind of like week or so. And so I have a list of these kind of emails that come in, which allows me to scan stuff and see what people are doing. And so that's a really simple thing. But Natalie, you're right. It's like it's a lot of reading and just thinking about sort of like stuff and trying to join the dots. But the thing I learned very early on in my writing sort of like journey is that I wasn't writing to be right. I'm writing just to explore. So I always call my kind of like my writing, particularly like blog or the Forbes or whatever, I describe it as being my public thinking digital notebook.
I like that.
Yeah, it's like a
So it's
diary.
just
That
an
is
idea.
literally a blog.
Yeah.
A blog is
So-
not supposed to be factual. It's not supposed to be 100% correct, but it's
Well, but some people, again, that's that sort of thing. It's like some people don't do it because they're afraid of what other people might think.
yeah.
And I'm a bit like, uh, here's a secret: I don't write for anybody else but myself. Because here's the thing I learned: that the fact that I've developed an audience is an absolute bonus. It's in economics terms, what one would call a positive externality. And what I mean by that is that it allows me space to connect different data points and then try and tell a story around them. Now I can do that in my head, but here's what I learned is that thinking that you know and you understand something in your head is not a guarantee that you know and understand something. You only really know and understand something when you take that idea and you try and write it down or communicate it to another. And so writing for me becomes a thinking and learning process. And so I don't find it easy a lot of the time. And I wrestle with things about how to express them in the right sort of way, in the way that I feel comfortable with. And that process can feel slightly masochistic at times. I'm beating myself up. So I don't enjoy it, but I enjoy the outcome. Enjoy the end, and therefore for me it's worth it. And I would encourage more and more people to do it now, whether you publish it publicly or not, that's fine. But write and explore, think and question kind of things. Why is it done like that? How can we do it differently?
Yeah, Adrian, I really like what you said there where you were writing for yourself. It made me think, every one of us, we also consumers. So if you're writing for yourself, you probably writing for someone else as well. You never know. There's so many people out there that are so similar that you're writing for someone that's the exact same kind of consumer as well. I know there's many like me out there.
Sure. And I think that's the thing is like, if it happens that somebody else, it's of value to somebody else, then that's brilliant. But if you're the one that's kind of that it's also helped you clarify your thinking about what you really think and how you really kind of feel about something, then you've immediately got benefit from it. Now, that I understand that that's a completely personal perspective, but I would suggest that I'm probably not alone in that thinking. And sometimes it's just about starting.
Completely. I think that's some decent insight there, Adrian. I think for sure. But I guess going from a very deep topic over to something a little bit more fun, we are going to test your knowledge on South Africa, and see exactly.
Quick,
No Google alerts, no using that economics degree, not allowed. But over to Nat.
Yeah, so we have a South African trivia section, which it's just going to be 3 questions, like Bryce said, just to test your knowledge. So the first question is, what is the longest recorded cricket match in history, which lasted 14 days, so about 2 weeks? Is it A, England versus Australia? Is it B, India versus South Africa? Or is it C, England versus South Africa?
I will go for B, India versus South Africa.
Okay, locked in.
Question 2. What is Durban in South Africa often referred to due to its rich culinary scene? Is it A, coffee capital of South Africa? Is it B, the African spice city? Or is it C, the Indian food capital of South Africa?
I am going to go with C, the Indian food capital of South Africa, because I know that there's a large Indian emigre sort of population in South Africa, and there has been for decades. And so I don't know where they traditionally or historically have congregated, but I'm thinking it's more because Durban's on the eastern side of the of the Southern African cone, and so I'd imagine it's
we'll
probably
lock
there.
it in. And then question 3, last question. Which World Heritage Site in South Africa is renowned for its famous fossils, including the finding of Mrs. Place? Is it A, Garden of Eden? Is it B, Cradle of Humankind? Or is it C, Kruger National Park? These are quite hard. I'm glad.
So the Cradle of Humankind, I think, is probably refers to something like the Rift Valley, which is further north in Africa. I think, archaeologically speaking, I've never heard of the first one other than a reference in the Bible, of course. So I would go Kruger National Park because it's the only one I've really heard of.
Okay, how do you think you did out of 3?
If I got one, then I'd be happy.
So, answers. What is the longest cricket match in history? It was back in 1939 in Durban, South Africa, and it was England versus South Africa. It was back when tests weren't only 5 days. So 14 days of cricket is absolutely
right.
I can't think of anything.
I could never do that.
Oh, that is tough. So that is C. So unfortunately, you did not get that one right, but understandably, that was a difficult one. Question 2. Durban's nickname is the Indian food capital of South Africa. So you were bang on there. Well done. And then C, the Mrs. Place, which is, if I believe, one of the oldest, one of the first fully fossils of humankind way back when, and that is actually found at the Cradle of Humankind. That is actually about a 2-hour drive from where we are, and there's a lot of fossils that has been found in that area.
I got it.
At least you learned something.
Never mind. But I got one.
You learned something about South Africa.
Yeah, no, sure.
Which was the goal.
Absolutely.
But Adrian, now over to you for your interesting facts about your place of birth or the country that you are living in at the moment.
So I was born in Scotland. I'm Scottish. I was born in a place called Peebles. Lived in the borders of Scotland for the first part of my life. I then moved away, lived in different sort of places, and I've just come back. We've recently just moved back. My wife and I moved back to Scotland, and we're based in Edinburgh. But we're also based in a place called Leith in Edinburgh, which traditionally is sort of the docks, industrial part of Edinburgh, and it only recently became part of Edinburgh in about 1920. It was staunchly kind of like its own place. But the interesting fun fact, and I know we mentioned before, you both got golf shirts on with the Newton sort of like brand name emblem on it. And what's interesting about kind of here where I live, or where we live, is we are right next to a place called Leith Links. Now, Scotland has always been noted as being the home of golf, right? And sometimes people kind of like say that St Andrews is the home of golf. Well, St Andrews is probably the first golf club, formal kind of golf club. But out this window here, there's a park called Leith Links. And Leith Links was where the first rules of golf, and there was 13 of them, were established in the 17th century.
Wow.
There's my first fact. So the home of golf is here, outside my house.
Okay. That is really cool. Can you name all 13 original rules of golf?
Oh, wow.
No, I'm sort of like, I mean, some of the listeners might find this kind of slightly heretical, but I'm not a fan of golf, and I'm with Oscar Wilde when it comes to golf. Because Oscar Wilde, if you don't know the quote, Oscar Wilde was repeatedly quoted as saying, "Golf, what a great way to spoil a good walk in the country."
Brilliant. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for being on our show. I think CX Safari listeners, thanks again for tuning into a very, very interesting episode. That's certainly what I can say. But I think if we have to take something out of this episode as fellow listeners and learners, it's that having all the technological gear does not give you all the ideas in the customer experience world. You must be pragmatic in your approach to transformation. It doesn't have to be fancy necessarily. It just needs to be focused on delivering value and quality experiences for your customers as well as your employees. I think that's a standard. But maybe just before we wrap up, Adrian, do you want to give a quick shout out to your social media handles where we can find you after the show for listeners? Obviously, we'll put them in the show notes, but just for listeners to get an idea.
Well, I'm lucky in that I have a name that is not very popular. So my name is Adrian Swinscoe, so it's Adrian Swinscoe. And if you put that either separately or together and you put it on the into your favorite sort of search engine, you will find me, my website, my social media presence, whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter or on Instagram. It's like Punk CX, so that's slightly different. But you'll find me if you can just do a search for my name.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you for tuning in. We hope you had as much fun as we did and gained valuable experience insights.
Let us know what you think. Connect with us on social media and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Stay inspired, stay customer centric, and know that the world of customer experience and collections is within your reach, the global experience.